This is another folklore, native folklore. It's a different tribe. It's the Tlingit people, and they did have a how to pronounce it there. All right, so again, this does have a native that has retold the story, and let's see, the illustrator is not part of the same tribe, but it's part of the Smithsonian series of Tales of the People. And it's called How Raven Stole the Sun. It's by Maria Williams, and it's illustrated by Felix Vigil. All right. So we did read this during class as well. Some of eventually I'll hope to get some of them recorded that we'll read today and not have to wait so long because that's really helpful. All right. So Abbeville Press Publishers. This is the title page. In case you are using this for your annotated bibliography or your compare contrast essay or presentation. Don't worry, I'll talk more about that later. It's not all of those things. You can do a presentation or a paper. We're going to get into that. We did it talked about it a little last week. All right, so a long time ago, Raven, or Yale, was pure white from tips of his claws to the ends of his wings. He was very striking, like fresh snow in winter. This was so long ago that there were no stars, no moon, and no sun. People lived in total darkness, and their only light was from campfires. Raven was concerned about this. The stars, moons, and sun were kept in large, beautifully carved boxes in a chief's house. The chief was greedy and didn't want to share these wonders with anybody, not even his wife or daughters. Raven knew the chief kept the celestial lights all to himself and began plotting how he could take them away. Raven tried to get into the chief's big boxes, but was always caught before he could enter. Finally, he came up with a bright scheme for stealing the star, moon, and sun. The chief's daughter was a lovely young woman, and the chief knew that soon she would be ready to have children of her own. This made him happy because he wanted grandchildren very badly, especially a grandson. One day, the daughter was gathering berries and got very thirsty. She found a nice creek flowing with fresh, cool water. Raven quietly followed her, and as she began to scoop up water with her cup, he quickly transformed himself into a small pine needle. And Raven drifted into her cup, and the young woman swallowed him as a pine needle. Okay. So, several months later, the chief's daughter gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, but what the chief and his family didn't know was that the baby was Raven. The chief was very happy and proud. He had always wanted a grandson, and the baby cried a lot, but the chief was very present. He wasn't present, he was patient. All right, one day the chief noticed the baby was pointing to the box with the stars in it. He cried and cried for it, and finally the chief got the box of stars down to let his grandson play with it. Raven smiled and played with the box, and when the chief was not looking, Raven opened it up, and the stars flew out and up into the sky. So that's how we got stars in the sky. Yep. The grandfather was not pleased to lose his stars to the sky, but his grandson was happy for a little while, and this made him happy. But eventually Raven began to cry again. He cried and pointed to this box containing the moon. The chief remembered what happened the last time, but couldn't stand to see his grandson cry, so he handed him the box with the moon in it. What do we think happened? The grandson smiled and played with the box. When the chief looked away, the raven opened the lid, and the moon flew out and up into the sky. And that's how we got the moon in the sky. Raven loved making mischief, but he was growing tired of being a baby. He wanted to be a raven again. He missed his glorious feathers, he missed flying through the air, and he was getting really tired of the chief. But Raven waited because he was so curious about what was in the last box, the biggest box, the most beautiful of the 3 boxes. And so he began to cry. He cried and cried for days. Chief remembered what happened the last time with the moon and the stars, but he was so sad to see his grandson crying, so he handed him the last box, the box containing the sun. Of course, the cunning raven was waiting for this moment, and he opened the lid and freed the sun. What a beautiful sight. The sun flew out and up into the sky, and daylight came into people's lives. Raven was very happy, and now that his curiosity was satisfied, he changed back into a raven. The chief saw the transformation and became very angry. He had been tricked. The chief closed the door of the house and trapped Raven inside, and Raven knew the chief was bigger and stronger and would probably kill him. He flew around frantically, trying to find a way out. Finally, he spied a very small smoke hole in the ceiling, and he flew up to it and squeezed through. And as he did, the black soot coated his feathers. Raven joyfully burst out into the light of the day. Raven was very surprised to see that he was now completely black from the tip of his claws to the end of his wings. Every feather and even his beak were a bright, beautiful, shiny black. This was how Raven came to be black, as he remains to this day. And then they talk about Raven as a central figure in historical legends. Accounts of Raven's deeds span the Pacific coast from Canada, Alaska. So a lot of the stories include the Raven. Let's see. The tale of Raven stealing the sun is a traditional story throughout the region, yet each telling is a little different. Through the Tlinkits say the raven became a pine needle in the cup of the chief's daughter, the Athabascans believe Raven turned into a small fish in the Inuit version, and Raven transforms into a piece of moss. In Tlingit legendary history, Raven is both a compassionate creator and a mischief maker. And that's kind of making me think of the tricksters, but I'd have to read through that PowerPoint I gave you with all the elements of folklore and see what I think about that. The other piece I was thinking about is the creation myths, right? This does seem to be a creation myth in terms of the stars and the light, and the sun, the moon, and the light. The other thing I'm thinking about is some of you read the African version, the Why the Sky is Far Away. I think it might be an interesting thing to compare those two stories, and see what are the elements in common and what are some of the differences. All right, so then it says the great trickster, I just needed to keep reading, was not always so helpful. For example, Raven created the first mosquitoes, thanks a lot, from a bag of crushed leaves. But despite Raven's mischief, the people of the Northwest knew to respect his power. One chief learned the hard way when he killed Raven. The legend tells that all the lakes and rivers dried up, leaving nothing for his people to drink. After the chief put Raven back together, the water returned, and now no one dares to kill a raven. Again, they have words that are representative, so you could do environmental print in your classroom. It talks about the words of like your family, so it has words for mother, father, daughter, son, wife, grandparent, grandchild. So I think that's always interesting in a early childhood classroom to have some of that environmental print. In the tribe, the Tlingit words with the English words would be interesting for kids to see. And it does go into the Tlingit people. It's Tlingit people, but it's spelled Tlingit. And there's, I think, a lot that people could learn. It was published in 2001, it looks like. Anyway.